Let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're untangling a massive policy shift from July 10th that completely rewired global AI landscape. And we're also going to look at the pretty explosive political questions it left in its wake. So, let's dive in.
To really grasp the stakes here, we have to start with the sheer scale of Stargate UAE. This is a planned 5-gigawatt AI compute campus over in Abu Dhabi, and it carries a staggering $30 billion price tag. To put that into perspective, this isn't just a large data center. It's essentially a small city dedicated entirely to artificial intelligence. The UAE has been incredibly aggressive about positioning itself as a central hub in the global AI race, and a facility of this magnitude, well, that's the cornerstone of their whole ambition. U.S. officials actually pointed to the UAE's role as a major economic investor and a regional security partner to justify moving forward with this partnership. But, as you know, a campus like this is literally nothing without the hardware to power it.
And the hardware needs are mind-boggling. Just the first 200-megawatt phase of this colossal project requires roughly 100,000 NVIDIA Grace Blackwell GB300 chips, and they're supposed to come online in the third quarter of 2026. Think of these chips as the absolute gold standard of AI brains right now. This isn't about buying a few high-end computers. This is about securing a massive, continuous pipeline of the most sophisticated processors on the planet. But here's the catch. Getting that kind of volume of cutting-edge hardware out of the United States means navigating one of the strictest export control systems on Earth. Or at least it used to. Literally overnight, a 6-month bureaucratic nightmare turned into license-free access. Before July 10th, every single shipment of these controlled items required a really painstaking case-by-case review by the Bureau of Industry and Security. To give you some context on how slow this was, the very first batch of these advanced chips delivered to the UAE arrived in May of 2026. It took roughly 6 months from the initial approval to the actual arrival, and it reportedly required some serious high-level government intervention just to get it across the finish line. But after July 10th, that entire bottleneck just vanished for approved entities.
Basically, the Commerce Department greenlit approved UAE entities, like the state-backed G42 and its data center subsidiary Core42, to receive America's most advanced AI processors without needing individual licenses anymore. Technically speaking, what they did was reclassify the UAE. They moved it from country groups D3 and D4, which are highly restricted tiers tied to national security concerns, all the way up to country group A5. Now, A5 is the absolute highest trust tier in the entire U.S. export control system. The Commerce Department framed this massive leap as being totally consistent with the framework they'd signed earlier in the year.
But, we really have to ask what lies beneath the surface of that official narrative. While the public messaging focused super heavily on strategic partnerships and economic cooperation, later investigative reporting from Politico revealed something pretty wild. This July 10th announcement completely blindsided the career staff at the Bureau of Industry and Security. It turns out this top-level decision actually ran completely counter to urgent security recommendations that those very same staff members had submitted to senior department officials the year before. And those warnings were serious. According to leaked memos from the fall of 2025, career staff at the Bureau warned that expanding access dramatically increased the risk of these chips being diverted to adversaries, specifically China. The internal documents flagged really deep concerns about China's continuing influence in the Emirates. In fact, one person familiar with these internal assessments didn't mince words at all. They described the UAE as the primary diversion point for sensitive U.S. technologies in the Middle East, and I quote, by orders of magnitude. They explicitly warned that handing over expanded access to these advanced processors made that diversion risk far, far more likely.
What makes this whole thing so complex is the timeline. So let's map this out. Back in April 2024, Microsoft made a $1.5 billion investment in G42. That deal included a binding security framework negotiated with both governments, and it even gave Microsoft President Brad Smith a seat on the board. At the time, that move was widely seen as fixing the China diversion risk. Yet, fast forward more than a year later to the fall of 2025, and Bureau staff were still circulating warnings specifically about G42. This tells us that career officials either felt the Microsoft mitigations just weren't enough given the sheer scale of the access being proposed, or they believed that granting blanket, license-free access to the wider UAE ecosystem shifted the risk entirely.
But what if national security was actually only half the story? While the Bureau of Industry and Security was finalizing this massive export rule change, a completely separate, highly scrutinized financial timeline was unfolding right in the background. And this is exactly where the narrative pivots sharply. We go from a debate over technological security into a deeply polarized political storm in Washington.
We have to neutrally observe what was happening concurrently.
An expansion of chip access was rolling out on an overlapping timeline with massive UAE-linked investments into a cryptocurrency company associated with the Trump family. Reports including coverage from the New York Times highlighted that investors and officials affiliated with the UAE made unprecedented investments into World Liberty Financial. Some of those reports even put a related UAE-linked deposit at roughly $2 billion. So on one hand, you have the sudden easing of highly restricted export controls. On the other hand, you have a massive influx of foreign capital into an enterprise tied to the president's family.
Naturally, this set off alarm bells. Senator Elizabeth Warren's office characterized the move as a blatant conflict of interest, and that sparked bipartisan calls for investigations into whether administration officials personally benefited. Senator Warren, who is the ranking Democrat on the Senate Banking Committee, actually released a report detailing what she categorized as at least 10 policy actions benefiting the UAE following those investments. She went so far as to call the export control easement a corrupt deal and demanded that top commerce officials testify. Separately, Warren and Senator Alyssa Slotkin formally requested investigations, while Representative Bill Keating publicly pressed commerce officials on whether that crypto relationship influenced the export decision at all.
Now, here's a really crucial takeaway that we have to be crystal clear on. While these timelines perfectly overlap, there is absolutely no public evidence showing that the UAE's financial dealings influenced the export rule, period. The rule itself doesn't mention anything of the sort. What we have here is a correlation. But it's that exact overlap that has members of Congress demanding answers and launching these investigations.
And regardless of the political disputes, we're seeing a really fascinating legislative response. Senators Tom Cotton and Elizabeth Warren introduced the CHIPS Security Act. This is a bipartisan effort aimed directly at mitigating that underlying technological vulnerability we discussed earlier. If passed, it would legally force the Commerce Department to require physical or software-level security mechanisms on advanced AI chips before they can be exported to countries of concern, which absolutely includes the UAE. It's an attempt to solve the diversion risk, no matter how the political investigations actually shake out.
So as we look ahead to the rest of 2026, there are basically three distinct threads that will determine exactly how this high-stakes decision plays out in reality. First, the procedural thread. Will upcoming testimonies and congressional document requests finally surface those internal staff memos? Will we find out why senior officials overruled the career staff's security warnings? Second, the legislative thread. Is the CHIPS Security Act actually going to pass and impose hard rules on these exports? And finally, the operational thread. As Stargate UAE starts receiving these 100,000 chips later this year, is anyone going to be independently monitoring G42 and Core 42 to make sure they're actually complying with their security commitments?
What we are watching is the real-time collision of global tech dominance, international diplomacy, and intense domestic political friction. Every new gigawatt of AI compute power brings incredible economic opportunity, but as those internal memos warned, it also brings unprecedented security risks. As this global AI arms race accelerates, it leaves us with one critical question to think about. Where exactly is the line between the strategic geopolitical alliance and a massive technological vulnerability? Keep a close eye on how these investigations unfold, because the answer is going to shape the future of global AI.